Namaste. Namaste. Ego strength is one of the most important elements of psychoanalysis, an entity about which clarity and knowledge is very little. It is one of the difficult topics on which there has been very slow or practically very little progress in psychoanalysis. And we will learn about this more talk, less understood topic from our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vai. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sir, can we start off with what is ego strength?
Ego strength is a word like socialism and love. It means everything to everybody, and nobody precisely knows what it means. It is used in a variety of contexts by different people in psychoanalysis with very different meanings. On the whole, some people use it to say it is almost like an immune system at the psychological level. Just as in the body there is immune system, at the psychological level there is what they call ego strength. And so if the ego strength is high, no matter what problems you have, whether of the split open or the Oedipus unresolved or an attachment rupture or individuation separation problem, all of that can be handled by the system if the ego strength is high. So very roughly speaking, some people use ego strength almost as a synonym of a psychological equivalent of an immune system. However, if we go into the specifics of it and we look at the literature and the history of psychoanalysis, we see ego strength as a word being used to denote many things. Essentially, it is used to denote a capacity for, first, a capacity to be stable under normal environment. Let us say we take the case of psychosis and borderline. And in that case, even when in the environment everything is normal, the ego can still disintegrate because of the inner problems. So the first measure of ego strength is the measure of stability under normal environmental conditions. The second measure of ego strength or the meaning of ego strength is taken in the capability of the ego to coordinate the id, the superego, and the environment. So the first was stability under normal environmental condition. The second is capacity to coordinate between ego, id, and the environment. Third is reality acceptance and adaptation. And adaptation and acceptance slightly more than what we talked in the last point of just being able to function. So the capacity of adaptation and acceptance in efficiency terms leading to what we call a global average level of performance. That is third. Fourth is the capacity to use defenses efficiently. Fifth is to be able to withstand losses of any type, be able to withstand losses, right, and traumatic events, which is a capacity to withstand challenges from outside and inside. That is a very good measure of the health of the ego strength. And then we have the capacity to unorganize and do artistic creative work where a temporary withdrawal of the ego is called for. And yet again, the ego reasserts itself once the work is done. And Winnicott differentiates here between unorganizing and disorganizing. And we are referring to the creative capacity which involves unorganizing. So one measure of ego strength is the capacity to do that. Another measure of the ego strength or another meaning is capacity to take on high stress, high risk tasks and complete them in the world, doing something big in the world. And then we have the capacity of the ego to uh, the capacity of the ego for self-exploration and therapy. Many people don't have this capacity, and when they come into therapy, uh, the extremely fragile patients, many times they have to be held and not given interpretative therapy because they can easily disintegrate. The capacity for self-exploration is not there and therapy is not there. And lastly, the capacity to experience rare states, which may be parapsychological or which may be spiritual. The capacity to experience those states is very essential. So all these are various ways in which the word ego strength is used. So all
Can
of
you,
this, yeah.
Sorry. No, actually, it's my another question. So
Yeah,
you
please.
finish.
I was just saying, different theories and different schools and different people writing research papers have used different meanings of the word ego strength. But this is what it means in literature.
So can you give some examples of what is high strength and what is low ego strength? Maybe it is easy for us to understand.
Take a few examples on the low and the high side. Take the example of person with psychosis where purely because of internal events, fantasy events, non-optimum use of defenses, the ego disintegrates and the person gets into trouble. An acute episode comes out. Take another example of a borderline personality or a fragile person who under small amount of stress from the outside experiences ego disintegration. The use of defenses falls down in efficiency and symptoms start coming up. Take example of a person who has autism and disintegrates at the slightest fear of a stranger or the slightest fear of a change in the environment. Take the example of a person who at the lowest sign of fear experiences a panic episode. Take the example of a person with social anxiety who at the slightest exposure to a group event suddenly gets into a high anxiety situation. So these are all examples of low ego strength situations. Now look at the high ego strength situations. People who take on very challenging tasks, people who are successful businessmen, who are successful army persons, who are very successful politicians or policemen, or very successful business people, or very successful top management people in organizations who are handling stress far more than you and I handle. Take the second example of a person uh, who under interrogation, under torture, still does not break down. He may biologically go unconscious, but psychologically still he is not breaking down. Take the example of a person who has lost everyone in the family, but yet is able to live after the grieving period a fairly good and cheerful life. In literature, we have example of Dr. Zhivago, and we have the example of the piano player, the pianist, sorry, in which we see how people who are in the middle of tragedy don't break down. They hold themselves together and they live a meaningful life. Take examples of people who, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book In Search of a Meaning. He saw in the Holocaust camps a group of people who did not break down even under Holocaust conditions. Take the example of those people about whom novels are written. A very good novel is Little Women, where three girls who lost both their parents bring themselves together without losing hope and make a life for themselves and others. So these are very high ego strength people who even in the middle of high adversity don't break down, don't give up. They are able to be consolidated, integrated, use their capacities and make something of life for themselves and for others. So these are some of the examples on the pathological normal and the supernormal side.
So then how is this ego strength understood from a functional standpoint?
That is where again a difference comes school by school, thinker by thinker. Uh, Freud looks at ego strength primarily after the emergence of ego in his view in doing certain things. So for him, it is capacity to facilitate the psychosexual development process after its emergence. It is the capacity to coordinate between id and superego and the environment. And it is the capacity to use defenses. So for Freud, this is how he would look at ego strength. Something that can manage the id along with the superego. So this was Freud's view of how ego strength ought to be looked at. Jung looked at it differently. For Jung, uh, ego strength meant how much of the ego was listening to the self and the collective unconscious, the program of life, and how much of it was under the influence of the environment. And based upon this will be the strength of the ego self-axis. And for him, the strength of the ego self-axis was something very near to ego strength. Although they are not comparable, the whole concept is different, but this is something nearby crude comparison. And for Jung, ego strength was not as important as for Freud was, because they looked at ego differently. So for Jung, the ego self-axis, which is actually a kind of strength derived by getting in touch with one's authentic self, that was the real measure of what we would normally call the ego strength. For Winnicott, it was different. It was the capacity to be alone and the capacity to unorganize without getting disorganized. And it was a capacity to be loving, playful, and healthy, and curious. For Klein, it was the capability to internalize a good, reliable, stable object. It was the capacity to enter into depressive position. It was the capacity to use defenses well. And it was the capacity to overcome the difficulties of envy and greed, apart from the primary aggressive difficulties. For Kohut, it was very different. For Kohut, ego strength, he looked at in a slightly different way. So he used two words, ego cohesion and self. And what we would normally call ego strength, he looks at it in two ways. One in terms of ego cohesion and second in terms of a healthy self. So for him, the healthy self and ego cohesion were sort of together put rough equivalents of what we would normally call an ego strength, and more of it was related to the self. So if we have a healthy self, if we don't have a psychotic self, borderline self, or narcissistic self, but we have a healthy self, then ego strength is high, and then it is on a scale. So ego strength is highest in a healthy self, second highest in narcissistic self, third highest in a borderline self, and lowest in the psychotic self. So he looked at ego strength in this way. ISTDP looks at ego strength in terms of the capacity to feel the feelings and the capacity to do it as quickly as possible without going into unmanageable anxiety. So they look at it slightly differently. For Bowlby, it was the capacity to uh, create good attachment patterns in adult life. For Mahler, it was the capacity to individuate and separate without any traumatic problem. And for Beyond, it was the capacity to uh, work well, efficiently upon the beta particles and work on repressed feelings so that there is no attack on linking and the capacity to be a good container. So this everyone has uh, put it differently. For Indian spirituality, the understanding has been that ego strength should be one, to be psychologically healthy, and two, go on to experience supra-ego states, the spiritual state, which are spiritual, parapsychological, or mystical, and again re-establish oneself in normal life as a healthy person. So it is not only confined to pathology, it's not only confined to normal life, but also it goes into experience of supranormal, spiritual, mystical, and parapsychological states, at times even hallucinogenic states. And therefore, their idea of ego strength is far more demanding than the idea of psychoanalysis.
So, sir, how do we understand structurally? How do you understand ego strength?
There are two ways of looking at it, because structurally, if you look at Freud, if you look at classical psychoanalytic thinking, uh, for Freud, he did not go into the creation of the ego. He did go into the emergence of ego, but did not go into what constituents constitute the ego. So he talked about an entity without talking about the constituents of that entity and the process through which those constituents came together. So for Freud, the ego was emerging as a structure without going into details of how it was emerging as a structure. For Jung, uh, also the same problem lies there. It does not go into the creation of the ego strength except to go into the strengthening of ego self-esteem and the ego looking inwards as much it looks outwards and going towards one's authentic self. The Kohut's way of looking at it was slightly better, because Kohut talks about uh, the forces which lead to creation of good ego strength, which we'll talk about slightly later. But he does list out that if these are the conditions which are favorable, then a healthy self is created and high ego cohesion or a stronger ego is created. So at least he goes into the structural, uh, not structural creation, but conditions which facilitate creation of a strong structure. At least that he goes into. But if we look into the ego, let us say as a wall, as a building, just as a building is created out of bricks and cement, if we put a question, what is the ego created out of? What are the bricks and cement that go into construction of the ego? And then we can go into how these bricks are connected together, because the strength of the joint will determine what we call ego cohesion. And the overall strength of the whole structure will uh, constitute what we call the ego strength. But that kind of a structural approach in psychoanalysis, we don't find anybody taking to ego strength. One way to understand it is to go out of psychoanalysis. So one way to look at it is to go out of psychoanalysis into spirituality. And I am tempted here to use the concepts which are there in Sri Aurobindo's model of the mind. And there structurally we can look into it in two ways. We classify the ego into two sub-agencies. The system ego, which is in the unconscious, which is very near to the instinct, and the personality ego, which Sri Aurobindo says is in the chest area in the front. So in Sri Aurobindo's model of the mind, in the front part of the chest area is located the personality ego. Behind that is the emotional center. Behind that is the psychic. So he has a different model of the mind, right? Rather the model of a human integer, so to say. So if we borrow a concept from there, then things become slightly better, more lucid and easy to understand. So structurally, we can view the ego into the ego, personality ego and the system ego. So when the child is there is already a biological I, even before a psychological I can develop. So before a psychological I and not I develops, the biological I is already there instinctually inbuilt. And this instinctually inbuilt part of the ego is what I would call the system ego. And this is there right from birth, or uh, in a very short time after birth, if there is a process of activation. But this does not need an elaborate emergence as Freud talks about. Whereas the personality ego is slowly built. And there is an emergence and slow build-up of the personality ego. So when the challenge comes from outside or inside, mostly from the outside, the personality ego disintegrates partially. And then beyond the point when it disintegrates, the system ego takes over. And it uses all the defenses of splitting, projection, sublimation, all of those things to keep the system the best way it can keep. When the disintegration is partial, the utilization of primitive, not primitive, but deeper system ego is less. And the more ego disintegrates, the more system ego has to take over. And we hardly see complete disintegration of the ego, personality ego. Right? Most of the times, regardless of how much it disintegrates, some core of it is preserved. And I believe in preservation of that core, the system ego also has a part to play. So if we conceptualize it in this way, then we can see ego strength as being the consolidated strength, or rather a synergetic strength of the personality ego and the system ego. From this point of view, and inside the personality ego, the strength of the personality ego itself depends upon ego cohesion, and the size of the ego in a metaphorical sense if you put a geometrical metaphor to it. So how the constituents of the ego inside are bonded with each other, what is the strength of those joints, what is the strength of those entities which join, and how many entities are joining, what is the volume of that ego. So that would be the internal assessment of the personality ego strength. If you view it, if you view it from this point of view, and we proceed on conceptualization and theorization on this point of view, we can much better understand the concept of ego strength on the structural side.
So then how is ego strength created or developed?
Ego strength is the, I believe you're talking about in therapy?
Yes. In therapy, of course, and even generally, as you said, personality is one factor which develops one's ego. And of course, culture also plays an important role.
Yes.
But in therapy, how do you handle it?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question that we can look at it as developing ego strength because of cultural conditions and developing ego strength because of therapy. And of course, the part of constitution always plays a part in both the cases. So there is a constitution, and then there are cultural conditions. Right? So conditions where a person is admired, encouraged, allowed to be on his own. He is not subject to a huge hierarchy over him. He sees people around him fairly empowered and he is able to internalize them. These are some of the, and the resources are made available to him, the minimum resources for development. These are good conditions for development of ego strength, apart from, of course, presence of good, reliable, stable objects around the person in terms of family and community. So these are good conditions. In therapy, when people come, obviously people come because the constitution and the family conditions and the cultural conditions were not enough to develop ego strength. And in the face of some traumatic event, the ego has disintegrated to some extent, or some difficulty has come up, and the person's efforts at developing ego strength and coming out of pathology outside of therapy have not worked. Therefore, they have come to therapy. So inside of therapy, when we look at how ego strength is developed, it happens through some important processes. First, the person is able to understand himself. And this understanding of what was otherwise unknown and unconscious, that enhances ego strength. Second, internalization of a good, reliable, stable object of the therapist, that enhances the ego strength. Third, catharsis of repressed feelings, that enhances the ego strength. Fourth, when the therapist becomes a good container, the person is able to internalize the good containing capacities, that enhances ego strength. The person absorbs the silence and the quietness and the peacefulness of the space, that is also salutary. The person gets approval, validation, that enhances the ego strength. The person is able to speak what would otherwise cause anxiety, and that speaking out of anxiety provoking material, that enhances ego strength. The person gets knowledge about himself, about others, about his own mind, that enhances ego strength. The person gets the condition for what is called going on being. Be oneself without any anxiety, without any criticism, without any interference. And that also enhances the ego strength. The ability to close the split, resolve the Oedipus, overcome the classical psychoanalytic pathological phenomena, that also enhances the ego strength of the person. And the substitution of immature defenses by mature defenses, that also enhances the ego strength of the person. Tapping into one's authentic self, uh, being able to overcome attachment difficulties and reattach and establish good attachment patterns, that also enhances the ego strength. So based upon which school you are following, the therapy will take some route. But these are some of the the good enough mothering the person did not receive and is now receiving, that also enhances, very important, the ego strength. The ability to feel directly the feelings and remove the defenses to the extent possible. All this, they enhance the ego strength of the person, and different schools do it in different ways.
So what do you mean by realizing, I mean, connecting to your authentic self? When you say that, can you just elaborate on that?
One way to look at personality is to look at it as the persona, the authentic self, the essential self, and the spiritual self. That is one way to look at the personality. And mostly we live in the persona with a little accommodation of the authentic self. So one may like to become a poet, but one becomes a doctor because that is worldly wise to do. So here we are living out of a persona. Somebody may not have the desire to really buy new clothes, but he buys new clothes only because he is moving in circles where he has to wear new clothes every third or fourth time he goes there. Somebody may not be interested in talking about certain things, but he talks about it just to feel good in a social circle. So these are instances where we are more under influence of society rather than inside. So there we are living out of persona. As we go deeper, we realize that we have our own unique good and bad parts put together in the form of an authentic self.
Hmm.
And then we go deeper still, we find a kind of a spiritual self, which is even deeper than the authentic self and is much purified compared to the authentic self. But it's not easy to purify oneself so much that one can realize and be one with the spiritual self of oneself. Most people find it difficult even to reach the authentic self. So in this inner journey, mostly people are largely in persona with some part of authentic self accommodated. Very few people are substantially in the authentic self, and in the when we talk about Jung, when we talk about Heidegger, when we talk of existential philosophy, existential psychotherapy, finding one's authentic self and living there is of primary importance. And that is why Jung places such a high emphasis on the strength of the ego self axis, which is another way of saying living out of authentic self.
Saren, what is the difference between ego strength? Is it same as ego cohesion or healthy self?
This is a confusion. Yeah, no, it is not the same. It is a confusion which is created in the cohesion theory. So, in Kohut's theorization, he does not define the self, but he does define a healthy self, unhealthy self, and he also talked about ego cohesion. Now, when the self is everything, the sum total of personality, then ego obviously is one part of the personality. So ego becomes a part of the self. Ego is not the same as the self. The self is much bigger and ego is a part of it. So normally what we talk about as ego strength, Kohut would talk about it in terms of the healthiness of the self. and in a minor way with ego cohesion, but primarily with respect to the healthiness of the self. Now, there are difficulties because at times it appears as though he is synonymously talking of ego cohesion and healthiness of the self. At times it appears as though the self is a bigger entity, ego is a part of it, and we are really talking about the health of the self, which normally we talk equivalently speaking as ego strength. Now, this is the confusion created by him. And the ego cohesion we can understand by saying that even if we conceptualize ego, right, not in Cohusian terms, but in normal psychoanalytic parlance, we can look at ego strength in two ways. One, what is the strength of constituents of the ego and the strength of the joints where they come together? And two, how much of these constituents are there in volumetric sense? Metaphorically speaking, of course. So, uh, that is where even in normal psychoanalytic parlance, ego cohesion is not ego strength. Ego strength will mean the ego cohesion, which means the strength of the joints of the constituents and the strength of the constituents and amount of constituents. That would be ego strength. And if you look at the model that I had proposed, personality ego and system ego, that strength of both of them would aggregate to ego strength. So that is how the differences are. Ego strength is a larger concept than ego cohesion, and Kohut's self is a larger concept than ego.
So in Winnicott's concept of unorganizing the ego, adoration of low ego strength, which would be counterintuitive?
Yes. So this is the difficulty which many people find it counterintuitive, that Winnicott talks about two different things: unorganizing of the ego and disorganizing or disintegration of the ego. And he says, under stress, if the ego is not healthy enough, it disintegrates, resulting in pathology. So disintegration of ego is pathological. But this he calls as disintegration or disorganizing. But there is a second state of the mind which he calls unorganizing of the ego. That means, suppose you want to do art, you want to do imagination, creativity. Now you cannot do that in the mode of rationality and reality adaptation. So the ego takes a back seat and allows the imagination to come up. And ego only directs it from a distance in a very soft way. So the imagination is purposeful. It is not psychotic fantasy. Ego exerts a control from a distance very softly without interfering with the fantastical process. In this state of creativity, where the ego consciously takes a back seat, governs from a distance very softly the creative process, the person is able to be in a creative state, the person is able to feel the bliss of the creative state, the person is able to be playful like a child, the person is able to completely be himself and not be constrained by the rationality of the adult. This state Winnicott calls is the state of unorganizing, and this unorganizing is not disintegration. It is a very healthy state of a very healthy ego which can consciously go into a state of distance, recession, receding itself, receding into the background, and from there gently controlling from a distance the operations of the mind and allowing the child, the playfulness, the creativity to come out. So Winnicott's unorganizing is not disintegration. It is actually a very healthy, very productive state of the mind. And it requires high ego strength to get into that state.
So, sir, how do we heal low ego strength in psychotherapy? What are the ways?
Freud would deal with it by resolving the Oedipus complex and resolving the anal problems of psychosexual development. Klein would deal with it by closing the paranoid schizoid split, facilitating internalization of a good, reliable, stable object, dealing with envy and greed, going into guilt and reparation, and gratitude. Beyond would deal with it by enhancing the containing capacity, by enhancing the conversion of beta into alpha, by working on narcissistic rage and envy, which can attack the linking function of the ego. ISTDP would work on it by bringing out the repressed feelings and thereby enhancing the capacity of the ego to feel more feelings without anxiety. Bowlby would look at it by re-establishing or making the person experience good attachment patterns to overcome difficult attachment patterns of the past. Jung would look at it by going in for individuation and authentic self and accepting the whole of oneself and integration. Uh, Indian spirituality would look at it by integration of all the parts of oneself, the abnormal, the normal, and the supernormal. Winnicott would look at it by providing the person good enough mothering indirectly in therapy. And Kohut would look at it by correcting the errors in childhood, be it of mirroring, idealization, impingement, self-object experiences, twinship experiences, or an optimum arc of tension experiences. So different ego psychology would look at it by looking at substitution of immature defenses by mature defenses and an analysis of those defenses. People into logo psychology would look at it by an appeal to superego strength by putting in a purpose. And the existential psychotherapy group would look at it by exploration of the existential dilemmas and living out an authentic life that was possible and a complete unconditional self-acceptance. So different schools would have different ways of enhancing ego strength. The difficulty is we have not yet created a basket full of tools which are standardized, which can be used in therapy or in self-work by the patient to enhance ego strength.
So spirituality and holistic healing, do they have tools to enhance ego strength and handle it?
Yes. Indian spirituality in particular has quite some things to say about the ego. And they don't worship the ego nor they condemn the ego. They accept the ego, but they believe it has to be understood and brought under complete control. And this is different from the way classical psychoanalysis looks at it, where part of the ego is in the unconscious and cannot be controlled or be aware or be made aware of, or what can be made aware of. So Sri Aurobindo has a very good line on this. He says, in human life, ego is the helper and ego is the bar. So for some part of one's development, ego is the helper. That if you don't have a strong enough ego, you fall into pathology or you are not able to be successful in life. But beyond the point, after those things are done and you are looking at spiritual advancement beyond the ordinary advancement, there the same ego becomes an obstacle. And there we have to work to reduce the effect of the ego and open up oneself to the spiritual, parapsychological, mystical experiences, which may not have ego at its center, which may push the ego to the side, and the significance of the ego may reduce in the overall psychic system. So this is the way spirituality looks at it, and spirituality has a basket full of tools in the form of idol therapy, mantra, visualization, rituals, uh, certain practices like avishkar, being with the guru. All these some herbal practices, some hallucinogen practices, uh, visualization practices, energy healing practices, a basket full of tools to first make the ego strong to overcome pathology, and then go towards supra ego experiences which are spiritual, mystical, parapsychological, and so on. So spirituality has a complete regimen, and based upon which spiritual school you follow, the details will differ. So you may follow the yogic school, the Tibetan school, the Sufi school, and Buddhist school, or the Vaishnava school, or Tantric school, and or the Hatha Yoga school, or the Kriya Yoga school, and there will be a difference of application, difference of details. But whatever spiritual school one follows, there is an elaborate theorization of ego, creation of ego, ego strength, management of ego, and a basket full of tools to help a person, given his personality and state of development, to facilitate the whole process of personal growth.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. And it was a delight to explore with you this subject. And for our viewers, you do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com with your suggestions and your questions. Till then, take care. Namaste.
Namaste.